The Providence-class carrier-destroyer, Invisible Hand, floated gently through the vacuum of space like some giant predator. The latest in a long line of Grievous's flagships, it had been personally commandeered for him from the Trade Federation, an ally of the Separatists. Surrounding it were 3 mid-sized Munificent-class frigates, a powerful Recursant-class destroyer, and even an enormous converted Lucre Hulk-class freighter, now a battleship. All told, the fleet was quite powerful, and more than adequate for tasks General Grievous had in mind for it.
"Sir,"
reported the B-1 battle droid sitting behind a sensor panel on the Invisible Hand's bridge.
"our sensors are detecting incoming ships in Sector 7B. Estimated distance approximately 70 kilometers on 16 degrees starboard."
The cyborg general nodded approvingly. It was just as the leaked intelligence said it would be, give or take a few degrees.
"Scramble all fighters and initiate course correction,"
Grievous ordered.
"I want our forward guns directly facing Republic ships when they emerge from hyperspace."
"Roger, roger."
The droid answered, and the great behemoth slowly began to come about to its new heading. 70 kilometers was a very short distance in the vastness of space, and certainly far less distance than orthodox military tactics suggested being from ships reverting to real space. It was all too easy for a simple error in calculations to result in catastrophic collisions between warships. But General Grievous had not earned his reputation or his rank by being unwilling to play fast and loose with the normal rules of war. A coward, some had called him, but he had never hesitated to seize the initiative with unconventional tactics. Leaked intelligence from within the Republic had reported that Jedi Master Hera Ceidia, a human female responsible for several Separatist reversals in the past few weeks, would be aboard the diplomatic convoy headed towards this worthless backwater of a star system. Normally allied to the Separatists, the Jedi was there to persuade the planetary government of the benefits of backing the Republic in its struggle against the Confederacy. Or rather, she would have been, had Grievous not already executed the entire planetary leadership to illustrate the consequences of attempted defection. Now, the General was determined to add the Jedi's lightsaber to his collection to cement the lesson to this system and any thinking of travelling the same path. And with the very precise coordinates Count Dooku had provided, this deadly ambush had been made possible.
"Sir, reversion imminent."
The droid piped up again, in its annoying squeaky voice.
"All forward cannons, prepare to fire,"
the General commanded. Seconds ticked by as the mechanical crew of the warship scrambled to carry out their leader's orders.
"Republic cruisers emerging from hyperspace in 3, 2, 1.
fire.
3 ships, one a vast dagger-shaped Venta-class star destroyer that the transponder identified as Fateful, and the other 2 puny Consular-class escort cruisers, emerged from their hyperspace jump blind, with their shields yet to power up. For a few critical seconds, they were completely exposed, and Grievous's fleet was virtually on top of them. To call what followed a space battle would be an insult to the term. The 2 smaller ships, with little armour and absolutely no warning, were blown to pieces in the opening seconds of the Separatist ambush. The vast salvo of turbo lasers and torpedoes blew onwards through their wreckage and smashed into the Star Destroyer. Much larger and with better armour, it avoided being destroyed instantly. Instead, vast holes were blown into its hull, and the majority of its guns were silenced before even having the chance to target the enemy. Most importantly, however, its shield generators were targeted specifically for destruction before they could envelop the ship in their protective fields. By the time the opening barrage ceased, fires were blazing out of control in more than a dozen locations, and much of the ship's port side was full of holes. Grievous looked on the burning, crippled Star Destroyer with a malevolent sense of satisfaction, pausing for a moment to enjoy the sight before giving his next orders. Destroying a ship was amusing, and occasionally even satisfying. But, after all that the Jedi filth had taken from him, after the loss of his honour, his home, and his organic body, there really could be only one way to deal with them.
All droid fighters, engage the enemy. Knock out any remaining guns and keep the space clear of enemy fighters and gunships.
He looked away from the seated machines to the black BX commando droid standing behind his command chair.
Prepare a boarding party. I shall kill the Jedi scum face to face.
The interior of the Fateful was almost as much of a wreck as the outside. Grievous's boarding transport passed through the open doors to the dorsal flight deck. Dozens of fighter craft and gunships sat wrecked and smoking on the deck. Only a third of them had managed to launch, and they were even now being swarmed by the Separatist Droid fighters. Among the scrapped ships, Grievous noted with no small satisfaction, was a solitary Delta 7 Aether Sprite class starfighter, which undoubtedly had to belong to the ship's Jedi commander. No others in the Republic military used such difficult, expensive ships. The hangar bay was littered with the broken remains of droids and a few clones who had valiantly attempted to fight back the initial wave of boarders. Grievous strode across the remains of his soldiers and those of the enemy without pause or ceremony, following the pathways he knew must lead to the command bridge and his target. The way would not have been difficult, even if he hadn't completely memorised the standard layout of the Venator class. Merely follow the trail of corpses. With commando droids taking the lead, and a pair of IG-100 Magna Guards covering the General's rear, the latest wave of the boarding party made good time. The double blast doors leading to the bridge were sealed shut, and surrounded by many wrecked B-1 and B-2 battle droids. A small group of clone troopers, undoubtedly dispatched to hold for as long as they could, stood between Grievous and his true foe. He nodded at the commando droids.
Kill him.
They didn't need telling twice. Blaster bolts, blue and red, flew back and forth as the black machines charged the white armoured troops with all guns blazing. They jumped acrobatically over and around the clones' improvised barricade, and were in among them with enormous vibro knives. Grievous watched with a vague interest as his droids butchered every last clone trooper. One of their number went down to a blaster shot between the eyes, but the others were still standing by the time the short skirmish was done.
Secure the area.
He directed a squad of 10 commandos.
Ensure no help arrives for our Jedi friend.
Roger, roger.
The droid in captain's markings saluted, and the designated unit rushed to do the general's bidding.
You two.
Grievous pointed to a pair of the droids he had witnessed kill particularly well.
With me. The rest of you remain here and make certain nothing gets in or out of this bridge.
Roger, roger.
The droids repeated mindlessly, assuming their assigned stations. Grievous plucked one of his lightsaber trophies from his midsection, igniting the green blade. Relishing the sensation of impending vengeance on the order that had so wronged him, he plunged it into the blast door, the plasma blade easily burning through thick durasteel.
Let's kill a Jedi.
Inside the bridge, Jedi Master Hera Ceidia was in the middle of a frantic argument with 2 of her clone bridge officers.
But sir, navigation's completely shot. We'll have no control over where we end up. We could go right into a star, or through a black hole, or end up marooned in the cold void to starve to death on our own ship.
And do you think falling into Separatist hands will end any better for us? Our self-destruct is already offline. We have no other option. So fire up the engines, Lieutenant. That is a direct order.
The aging human retorted, her greying blonde hair seeming to flow behind her in anger.
Sir, we might at least...
The clone's answer was cut off by the sight of a green blade emerging from the blast doors, quickly cutting in a wide circle. Master Ceidia bared her teeth and dropped into a fighting stance between herself and her remaining officers, her bronze-bladed lightsaber igniting in her hand. Within seconds, the burning circle in the blast doors was complete, and it fell over with a loud crash of metal on metal.
Lieutenant, get this ship into hyperspace right now!
Master Ceidia demanded.
We'll take this monster with us if we have to.
Oh, I don't think that will be happening.
Announced a deep, heavily accented voice no Jedi could fail to recognise as its owner stepped through the hole. General Grievous, the infamous hunter of her kind, had come.
Hera Ceidia, isn't it?
He asked, taking a step forward.
I've been looking forward to meeting you.
The Jedi Master got the distinct impression that behind his mask, the cyborg was smiling. Grievous's laughter barked out, and he threw his arms wide. Above the bone-white cyborg flipped a pair of commando droids. Around his sides came 2 Magna Guards, electro-staffs twirling menacingly. As one, the droids charged the Jedi Master. Immediately, her lightsaber flew up to deflect a barrage of red blaster bolts from the commandos. Over a dozen bolts she sent flying in all directions, but her distraction allowed the Magna Guards to close the distance, and they swung their dual-ended electro-staffs at her in synchronized assault patterns. One to her right, one to her left, with the commandos hanging back and firing into the melee when they saw the opportunity. Master Ceidia was already hard-pressed, and Grievous himself hadn't even entered the fight. She settled into the invaluable defensive patterns of the standard lightsaber Form 3, Sorosu, catching each bolt, or swinging as it came, deflecting them to one side or another. She was no master of the form, as Master Obi-Wan was, but she was practiced enough. The Force guided her to intercept each blow before it could land, her arms moving with supernatural speed. Her initial difficulty levelled out into a calm acceptance as she allowed the tranquility of the light side to fill her. Several seconds in, the combatants were at stalemate, but the Jedi Master needed only an opportunity. And then she got one. The blaster bolt of a commando droid, aimed at her chest, she caught on the edge of her lightsaber blade and redirected it directly into a Magna Guard's face. The droid staggered back, its system scrambling to readjust itself. Master Ceidia ducked underneath the uppercut swing of the other Magna Guard and swung her lightsaber to cut the first one in half. Deflecting 2 more shots from the commando droids, she used the Force to hurl the remains of the droids directly into one of the commandos at high speed, bowling it over and smashing it into one of the walls. Faster than should have been possible for a human her age, the Jedi Master flipped over the head of the second Magna Guard and thrust her blade at its back. It spun around and caught the swing just in time, but it had lost its momentum. Master Ceidia took the offensive against the droid, with a precise series of jabs and thrusts from the elegant, one-handed dueling-centric Form 2, Makashi, keeping the machine off balance. The remaining commando droid drew its vibro knife and leapt in behind her. She ducked beneath a simultaneous knife swing at the back of her neck and staff thrust towards her heart. A Force nudge propelled the Magna Guard further forward than it intended, and its electro-staff jabbed the commando droid in the chest, shorting it out with a lethal dose of electricity. And then, Grievous went in. One moment, he was standing there with both arms folded behind his back, simply observing the ebb and flow of the combat. The next, he exploded into motion, 2 arms splitting into 4, each holding a stolen blue or green lightsaber. Simultaneously, he bounded forward on his clawed feet, all 4 hands spinning their lightsabers impossibly fast, a virtual tornado of blades. Master Ceidia flung herself hurriedly backwards to avoid the cyborg general's initial charge, which placed him between her and the Magna Guard. Despite his great weight and momentum, Grievous turned on a dime to face her. His 4 arms rained down lightsaber blows at speeds far in excess of what a mere organic could accomplish. His blades spun, slashed, stabbed and swiped at seeming random, giving the Jedi no chance to recover between strikes. Foot by foot, the general forced her backwards until she was virtually pinned against the wall. Her Sorosu kept her alive, the living Force giving just enough warning of where the blades would fall to allow her to dodge or block, but she had no chance of the offensive, and worse, the cyborg would take far longer to tire than a middle-aged human woman. The Magna Guard prowled the edges of the duel, looking for an opportunity to dart in and deliver a blow, but the lightsabers were moving so quickly that even the advanced combat programming of the droid could not pinpoint any opportunity to strike its enemy without hitting its master. For almost half a minute, the frantic duel continued. General Grievous struggling to land a hit on the Jedi Master, she striving merely to hold him off long enough. Then, without warning, Grievous spun around, abandoning the duel. With as much speed as his legs could generate, he charged the clone officers, still seated at their consoles and frantically trying to bring the ship's engines to working status. Calling on the Force, Master Ceidia jumped through the air after him, trying to interpose herself. Her manoeuvre came too late to save the closest clone, whom Grievous killed with a single cut across the chest.
Hold your posts!
The Jedi cried out as she once again became the target of the whirring rain of lightsaber blows.
Get this ship into hyperspace or we all die for nothing!
You're all going to die for nothing, either way, Jedi elf.
Grievous spat, redoubling his efforts to break Master Ceidia's defense. Randomly, he swung at clones, forcing the Jedi to ignore her own protection to save them. Master Ceidia caught a particularly powerful double-handed overhead blow aimed at a clone with her lightsaber. Grievous pressed down hard, and all three blades were locked together in a contest of strength. That gave the MacLeod all the opportunity that it needed. Master Ceidia let out an involuntary shriek of pain when an electrostaff jabbed her in the back, unleashing thousands of amps of electricity across her body. Her nervous system spasming uncontrollably from the sudden input, she had no way of stopping the other two of Grievous's blades from descending in a wide arc, and slicing both her legs off. Jedi Master Hera Ceidia's face contorted with mute agony, as she felt her limbs being burned through by the dual plasma blades. Her hands released her lightsaber, and she crumpled, its bronze blade flickering out without the continued pressure of her grip on it. She hit the floor hard, but her body was in such shock that she barely felt it. With all the desperation of a drowning man, she clutched for the Force. Grievous wasted little time. As soon as the Jedi Master went down, he and his remaining MacLeod descended on the bridge crew with all the fury of a hurricane. Fully armoured, veteran clone troopers were no match for him, still less those in mere cloth uniform who had rarely seen ground combat. They scrambled desperately to put space between themselves and the cyborg. A handful of them even managed to snap off some blaster shots. It did them no good. Grievous's armour was far too strong for blasters. The very last clone, Grievous dragged by his neck over to where the fallen Jedi lay. Hoisting him up to give Master Ceidia the best view, he impaled the clone right through the heart, before tossing the still twitching corpse aside. She reached out almost pleadingly for her lightsaber, but Grievous scooped it up in a clawed hand first. Next, he reached down and grabbed the Jedi by her own thin neck, lifting her high enough that their faces were level.
Jedi moron.
General Grievous mocked.
Your sacrifice was for nothing.
She stared directly into his eyes, despite the unimaginable pain she was enduring.
Not...
She wheezed.
nothing.
2 fingers of her right hand managed a small gesture. Grievous followed the direction her hand seemed to indicate. At the end of the trail was a control console. A control console with a single depressed button. Around the pair came the unmistakable sound of engines whirring in preparation for something big. And then the Star Destroyer Fateful shot into hyperspace, without guidance or destination, taking the supreme commander of the droid army with it to parts unknown. Grievous growled angrily, fixing his eyes on the helpless Jedi Master once more.
You're going to die for that.
He spat. A ghost of a smile twitched in the corner of Master Ceidia's mouth.
There is no death.
She managed.
There is only the Force.
I think you will find.
Grievous pressed the deactivated hilt of her lightsaber up against her sternum.
That death
He fingered the activation button.
is quite real.
Grievous pressed the button. A bronze blaze shot out of the hilt, impaling Jedi Master Hera Ceidia directly through her heart. Her body twitched once in a death spasm, and then was still. Grievous tossed her carcass aside, adding her lightsaber to the ones already magnetically attached to his waist. His eyes looked around the ruined bridge, his keen mind racing. He had his victory, even if it had become sour. Now he had to figure out how to stop this thing. Many light years away from the tumultuous events unfurling in the vacuum of space, a certain lavender alicorn princess by the name of Twilight Sparkle was peering up through her telescope. The night, as she had requested from the Cloudsdale weather team, was clear and crisp, without a single cloud to mar her view of the stars. The view from atop her recently obtained Crystal Palace was excellent, and she was very pleased to note that the amount of time it took to observe and record each individual section of the sky had decreased by a whole 1.6%. The stars were beautiful on that night, and she could clearly make out several of the major constellations without even the aid of her personalised telescope. Not that that prevented her from using it at every opportunity, of course. As with many fields of science, Twilight found astronomy to be a truly fascinating subject that was sadly often underrated. Princess Luna, at the very least, had been very pleased with Twilight's most recent choice of study. Sadly, the same could not be said for her dragon assistant Spike. He was with her on her high viewing platform, true, but he was also curled up on a beanbag chair and reading a comic book. Like most ponies, he clearly lacked adequate appreciation for the fascinating science that was the study of the night sky. "Hey, Twilight?" He removed his face from the comic without warning. "Do you think there are aliens out there?" "Aliens?" Twilight snorted. "Don't be ridiculous. Such notions are mere folk superstitions invented to explain certain strange anomalies we simply haven't fully unravelled yet. You live on a world where the sun and moon are driven by two ponies. You fought against the reality-bending spirit of chaos, been to another dimension inhabited by weird, two-legged creatures twice, and weaponized friendship into a bad guy blasting rainbow laser cannon. And you don't believe in aliens?" Spike deadpanned. "Of course not," Twilight scoffed. "Science has never unearthed any convincing evidence of life coming into existence on other planets. And until such time as it does, we must assume that it has not." "You mean beside the other planet filled with weird alternate us?" "That's completely different," Twilight exclaimed, finally looking away from her telescope. "Where are you getting such ridiculous notions from anyway?" Spike held open his comic book for her to see. Inside was a full-page drawing of a gigantic flying saucer, piloted by bug-eyed green pony things, abducting dozens of screaming ponies from a desolate desert landscape. Twilight flipped through the next several pages, showing ponies being viciously experimented on and mutated into weird, unnameable things by bizarre tools on the end of long metal arms. The ending showed the same tools descending upon the main protagonist, who was helplessly strapped to the table and crying out with all his might. "Where did you get a comic like this?" Twilight complained. "This is far too intense for a dragon of your age. You'll get nightmares." "Well, Spike coughed nervously. Then he pointed. "Hey, look, an alien!" Twilight rolled her eyes, but obligingly turned around anyway. Surprise, surprise, there was nothing there. And when she turned around again, Spike was gone and the door was partially open. "Aliens," she snorted again, placing the confiscated comic on her table beside her research notes. "What a bunch of ridiculous nonsense." Twilight peered back through the telescope, carefully studying the constellation dubbed Aurorus Major. For several minutes she looked back and forth from the sky to her notes, the conversation with Spike slowly fading from her thoughts as she immersed herself in the glories of astronomy. Then, without warning, the vision of her telescope was filled with a view of pitted, blackened metal. Startled, Twilight took her eye out, dialed back the magnification, and looked again. A vast, grey, triangular thing was flying through the blackness of space. Its hull was made of dull grey metal, interspersed with charred holes and a long red stripe down the centre. The apparent rear featured numerous large cylinders that glowed a bright blue at the end. As Twilight watched, the object flew through space at a very rapid pace, heading for... Twilight swung her telescope around to look.
The moon,
she breathed.
It's headed straight towards the moon.
At her estimates, the mysterious thing would crash into the dark side of the planet's moon unless it changed course within the next few seconds. It didn't. The gigantic flying object was on the verge of disappearing from Twilight's sight behind the moon when she noticed several small flashes along its side. Increasing her magnification, she noted several smaller objects detaching themselves from the sides and hurling towards. Twilight did a few quick calculations in her head. Her eyes widened.
Spike!
She called inside.
Can you get my field kit, please? I think I'm about to go out.
Huh? Came the response from wherever the small dragon was hiding.
This time of night? What for?
Aliens! Hello everypony. Sorry for the lack of videos lately. Things here have been mad all summer. We're trying to sell the house at the moment and there seems to be no end to the jobs that need doing. And add to that I work a 10-hour day job that hasn't really left much opportunity to get videos out. So sorry to everyone who's been waiting all this time. Thank you for sticking with me, and hello to everyone who's subscribed recently. The channel's been growing even without me uploading, and it's just amazing to see. I get a little notification on my phone every time someone subscribes, and it makes me smile each time still. For quite a few of you, this will be the first upload. I hope you liked it. I need to say a few other big thank yous. Firstly, to Snake Stuff, who wrote this fic and asked me to do a reading of it a seriously bloody long time ago. He's been really patient with me, but I think the wait will be worth it once we get to the end of this awesome fic. So please everyone, if you enjoyed this first part, click the link on screen or in the description and leave a like or a favourite and comment on his fic telling him what you thought of it. And while you're there, check out his other work. Some of you may remember he wrote Twilight versus the Narrator, which I read with Brad way back, so you know his stuff is good. Second, a really big thank you to Scribbler, who agreed to read a few lines for me. Back when Snake Stuff asked me to do this, as soon as I read the first part I knew I wanted to try and get Scribbler on board. I thought it would be fun to get the most popular reader killed off immediately, and she did an absolutely fantastic job on the lines. I will also put a link to her channel and Patreon down in the description if you don't already know her. Go check her work out, it's all awesome. This is a multi-part fic, and by a very wide margin the longest I've started. There will be other one-shots and things coming out, but I'll be trying to upload chapters of this very regularly. So thank you all for listening, and see you in the next video.